From EPAWA Weather Consulting, headquartered in Worth Whitehall, Pennsylvania, this is Weather Weeklies, an informative video of the ins and outs of weather that affect you most in the EPAWA coverage area. The thoughts and opinions expressed in this video are those of the forecaster alone and may not reflect those of the staff of EPAWA Weather Consulting LLC as a whole, nor its constituents. Now, without further ado, here is meteorologist Bobby Martrich with Weather Weeklies.
Good Sunday morning to you. It is now January 2019, and we have our first Weather Weeklies video of the month of January. Now we have, if you looked at the long range that we did on, or I did on Friday, it was very, very detailed and answered a lot of questions of why we've been in this kind of crappy pattern, non-winter-like pattern here for snow lovers, and what we think is going to change it, and when we think it's going to change, and how much snowfall we still think we're going to get this year. Now, we're going to get into that in this video here. I'm going to do a kind of visual recap of that. So there's really not a lot to talk about going forward here until we hit that magic date, which I identified as January 20th as the pattern change date. That is still on track this morning, but there are going to be some short-term changes from this. This is the long-range chart that we had out here on Friday, especially this period between the 10th and 13th, 14th. I think it's going to end up being a little bit colder than expected, and that's because we are going to start feeling the effects of the Madden-Julian oscillation going into phase 8. So we will have a little period there, a little window of opportunity of some colder temperatures, and maybe even as we get to late in the weekend, you might even have a little snow event, and they're trying to get there. I mean, it's not really shown right now, but some of the ensembles are showing it, and it's kind of like a too close to call type thing here with this, so I don't want to just turn my back on it and say nothing's going to happen. We're going to continue to watch it. That period of display will be next Sunday into Monday type thing if it were to occur. So we'll keep an eye on that period, but it does look like it's going to be colder starting this Wednesday, Thursday time frame all the way through next weekend. So this is a change from that long range we did on Friday, and this is in response to the Madden-Julian oscillation going into the colder phases temporarily. Okay, so we had a rain system move through already. That's already gone. Next one we're going to turn our attention to is this icing that we have here north of the region, or for the northern areas, and it's just going to be a minor thing. This isn't a major deal, but this looks like it's going to be around midnight or so on Monday night into very early Tuesday morning. It's like 6 to 7, 8 a.m. maybe. It's finally out of here, but this is just some light freezing rain, light freezing drizzle. Not a big deal, but it can be a big deal because icing, it doesn't take much for there to be issues. And at this point, overnight on Monday night, it's going to be pretty cold. The freezing line is going to be all the way down here like this. There's the freezing line. So all this up here, even though it's falling in the form of rain, whether that be drizzle or light, mist or light rain, it's freezing on contact. So we're going to watch that very closely. That, of course, is for Monday night. Now, we talked about the Madden-Julian oscillation in the opening part of the video here, and we are currently in a phase 7. It is projected to go into a phase 8, though, which means this is going to move a little bit further east toward the international date line where your best convection is along the equator there. And here's what a phase 7 does, a little milder. Then we get into phase 8, and you're colder. That's what happens in January. Well, we are, in fact, in phase 7, and we're heading into phase 8. There's a couple-day lag time until you start feeling the effects of it. That's why we don't see it until Wednesday or Thursday. Well, Wednesday is pretty much the change day. And then we go stay cold through the weekend because you have this cycling through phase 8. So this is all through the weekend right here. Then after that point, it goes into the circle of death. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that winter's over. Everybody seems to think here's circle of death. They're like, oh, that's it. It's done. Nope. Circle of death means that the Madden-Julian oscillation, which is your tropical forcing that dictates your polar heat fluxes and changes the jet configurations and gives you more amplitude and things like that. It just means that the Madden-Julian oscillation has no effects when it's in this circle. Okay, little to no effect on the pattern. So we don't have any, like each one of these phases correspond to a warmer or colder pattern during these months of December, January, and February. More specifically, in January, you're looking at phase 8, 1, and 2 as being the best phases for that cold and storminess. Well, we're going to have the cold come in here. I don't know about storminess. We'll have to watch right. So a lot of times you get these storms come in right when you're about to, once you establish yourself in phase 8 and it starts heading toward a circle of death, you can get something. But you can still get snow in this time frame when it's in here, when it's cycling through here, and it's expected to kind of cycle through that circle of death for a while. Our biggest snowstorms in history, number 1 and number 2. I'm going to use Allentown here because I'm pretty close to that. I'm about 10 miles north of Allentown. All right, so maybe not 10 miles, but just north of Allentown. We have our biggest snowfalls ever that occurred in Allentown, January 23rd, 2016, 31.9 inches from one storm. That's an all-time record. Mount-Julian Oscillation was in the circle of death. Blizzard 96, January 7th and 8th, I want to say, or 6th and 7th of 1996. Mount-Julian Oscillation was in the circle of death. So you don't need necessarily 8, 1, and 2 for it to produce. Although these are the cold and favorable phases for to see something, you can still get it in the circle of death, especially coming from a colder phase. So we're going to keep an eye on that period next weekend. Again, models aren't showing it right now. Some of the ensembles are, but I'm not really favoring one or the other right now. I'm just going to keep an eye on it just to see what it does. It is a coastal system that is shown to be well offshore right now, but you never know. Now, here's why the pattern has been so crappy, to paraphrase some of the comments I've seen on the Facebook page, because you guys are full of them all the time. You're like, oh, this weather stinks. Where's winter? Where's the snow? Well, if you have a very fast Pacific jet like we've had since about the second week of December, screaming across the Pacific, you can't get any amplification into the United States. And I'm trying to outline here where everything is. It's hard to see the outlines. So Siberia's up here, Alaska, Canada, U.S. This circle is where we are. Mexico down here. Here's the fast Pacific jet moving west to east very fast across the Pacific, and this is an extended jet, typical of an El Nino. Well, typically, when you want something to produce here in the wintertime, you don't want it that fast. The jet extension is a normal thing of an El Nino. That's not a surprise. But being this fast without any kind of amplification, you need some kind of amplification in order to get the cold and snowy patterns, and we just don't have that. We haven't had that since about the second week of January. The first week of January, I know it didn't produce snow, but you still had a colder pattern. It was an extension of November. And November, remember, a week before Thanksgiving, we had a snowfall because of that amplification. Well, we don't have that now. So we need to find out what's going to change this. What can we look to see how do we change this pattern? Get this to slow down a little bit, actually a lot, and get some more amplification in here so we can get some winter going. All right. One of those things is the stratospheric PV split. This has occurred. This is not a model guess anymore, even though I'm showing a model here. This is an actual thing that occurred. Okay, so up in the stratosphere, which is the stratosphere starts at about 33,000 feet at this latitude, 33,000 feet, and goes all the way up to 31 miles. So it's a very big area. Now think of the stratosphere as like an inverse of what you see in the troposphere. So if you have let's just say it's it's 50 degrees outside. All right. If you go up to the higher you go up in elevation, and this is not in altitude. I mean, higher you go up, the colder it gets. Right. Everybody knows that. So that's typically what happens. The higher you go up in the atmosphere, the colder it gets. All right. But once you reach the stratosphere, right in between the troposphere, where we live and our weather occurs, is the tropopause, and that's where your jet stream is and things like that. When you get above that, then you enter the stratosphere. The opposite effect occurs. So you get very cold, extremely cold, as a matter of fact, nearest the tropopause on both the troposphere and stratosphere sides. But in the stratosphere, as you go up in elevation, or up in, I keep saying elevation, as you go up in altitude, higher in the stratosphere, it gets warmer. So it's the opposite. Instead of temperatures getting colder as you go higher in the troposphere, it's getting warmer in the stratosphere. Now we're looking at the 10 millibar level here. Okay, so this is getting into the lower ranges of the atmosphere, and you can see, or of the stratosphere, I should say. So you have an intense warming episode that happened over that region. So instead of it being way up in the stratosphere at the top 31 mile point, it's getting closer. It actually pushed down to the lower portions of that, below 60,000 feet above the surface of the Earth. So you have this very, very warm blob here. That what it does is it compresses the air downward, away from the polar regions, and so all that Arctic air that's below it, it's usually found over the polar regions. Everybody knows the Arctic Circle and North Pole is very cold, right? Well, it forces that cold away from the normal polar regions, and it's still cold there, don't get me wrong, but it forces the air downstream into wherever these split vortexes are. There's 3 of them here. Okay, there's one out here that is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. There's one here over Europe, and one over southeastern Canada, the northeast U.S. Now, what we need to have happen is have that to couple to the troposphere, and of course downwell to the troposphere, so we can get some effects here locally. Well, here's where that warming occurred. Okay, so we know that happened. We already see it. It's observed. We're going to have what we think is going to end up happening is it's going to completely downwell here and go really close to this is the GEFS forecast, and it's really close to our forecast date of January 20th of the flip date. Very close. Okay, so we think the effects start coming down all the way to the surface, where we start feeling getting effects to our sensible weather and getting to a sustainable cold pattern right around the 20th. I think that's our magic number, and I don't see any reason this morning to change that. The only thing change we have, of course, is when we're in MJO phase 8 here for a brief period of time this week, from like Wednesday through about Sunday, Monday time frame. We're going to be a little bit colder because of this Madden-Julian oscillation being colder. That's not stratosphere related. It usually takes, in order to downwell to the stratosphere from all the way up here at this height, all the way down to the surface, it usually takes about 2 weeks. All right, so it's when this started happening to the point where it should downwell is about 2 weeks. That's what we're expecting. There's some other factors that we talked about in the long-range outlook on Friday, like the Southern Oscillation Index. We're measuring the differences in pressure between Darwin, Australia, which is right about here, and Tahiti, which is right out here. Okay, the pressure differences between this X area and Y area, which is those two places I just mentioned. It's measuring the pressure differences between here. And if you have this, like we've had over the past, pretty much most of the month of December, we are positive. And this is a very La Nina-like look here when you're in a positive, the positive values here. You want this to be negative and to have the trough, the amplification of the troughs to come into the eastern United States. This usually also has a 10 to 14 day lag time, puts us right around that January 20th time frame. So I do think because we've been consistently negative, and yes, I know it went up last night a little bit. Here's the latest value, negative 8.66. The point is, it's still negative. You don't want these positive values here, and it promotes the troughiness in the east. And around this time, you're going to have, you know, even if the Southern Oscillation Index gives up, you're going to have some stratospheric help eventually that will take over from that point, even if it does continue to trend upward. Now, here's the current January pattern. This is what we're looking at. Very zonal, fast east flow, so you can't get any amplification, can't get any deep troughs in the east. What you want to see is a big ridge out here and a trough in the east, and that's where you get your cold and snow from. We don't have that. You can see where this is where the jet is configured, and it's very, very fast. You get a little bit of mini ridge going on here. That's why we have the mild air coming in here recently. All right, but it's pretty much a fast west-east flow, and that's what we've been dealing with for quite some time. Here's the projected pattern near the 20th off the GEFS. This is off the latest run this morning, and you can see we're starting to get some ridging on the west coast of Alaska, western portions of Canada, all the way up into Alaska, and a trough coming into the east here, and you're going to have a cross-polar flow coming in here. You have the big polar vortex. This is not the stratospheric polar vortex now, this is the tropospheric polar vortex starting to make a visit. So that will come in, we think, as we get around. You see the date here is actually the night of the 21st, so it's about a day off from what I projected of the 20th, so it's pretty close. It's going to be close to the 20th. All right, and all this cold air is able to bleed into the eastern United States, and you get a cross-polar flow. So this is what we're looking for going forward. What can change the pattern? These are things that can change the pattern going forward. This happened in 2014, 2015, started in January, and it got really brutal in February. I do think we're going to be brutal in February this year as well. It's just a matter of when does the pattern change, and again, we think it's going to be around the 20th. In 2015, it happened a little bit earlier. Actually happened toward the beginning of the month, so we are about 2 weeks behind from what we were in 2015 as far as sustainable cold. I know we're getting that transient shot here Wednesday through about Sunday or thereabout, where it's going to be colder. I'm getting all kinds of pop-up notifications here. It's going to be colder here, but I think that's for a different reason, and it's still not going to be the full locked-in cold and sustainable cold. So it's still a transient shot coming in next week. That's not the pattern change. It will be cold, but it won't be the pattern change. It is coming. It's just going to be delayed, and this has been a theme for the last couple of years, so this shouldn't be a surprise. We haven't had really, it's been a while since we had a fast start to winter. Around these parts. It's been a long time, actually, and this has been the new norm. It's like January through March, and maybe even parts of April have been winter. It hasn't really been you know, December, January, February, which is the traditional winter months, so to speak. Around these parts lately, it's been more January, February, March, and in some areas bleeding into April. I don't know if it goes that long this year. I really haven't looked into that far. But I do think any stratospheric changes usually, once it locks in for a 45 to 60 day period typically. So that would take us through the entire month of February at the very least, and probably part of March. Okay, so keep that in mind. When you have a split vortex like this, and it just, these don't just go away. It's not a displacement. Displacements of the vortex are not as long lasting. When you have a split like this is hard to get rid of, folks. This is a 45 to 60 day period. It takes us right through the month of February and at least half of March. So we're going to have to deal with this for a while once it does flip. Even if it's March and everybody wants to talk about sun angle, oh, it's a bad time of year, the snow won't hang around too long. Who cares? Really, who cares? If it's snowing and you have impacts from it and it doesn't last but a day or two, who cares? That's good. All right? I don't know why you think you need to have piles and piles of snow on the ground that lasts for months. This is not, that's not a good thing. But anyway, here is the summary of the video today. That we're going to have a milder start to the week, then a cooler end to it. All right, so that starts around Wednesday, Thursday, and we have the minor icing events. It's kind of a thread-the-needle icing event. It's going to watch Monday night. Again, I don't think that's a big deal, but it is enough that icing can cause problems, even if it's a minor amount, so we will keep a close eye on that. Send alerts tomorrow for that once we have a better idea of the what we're looking at there as far as amounts. Right now it looks like a midnight to about 6 a.m. type deal, maybe 7 or 8 in some places, but basically an late overnight type thing on Monday. So Tuesday morning could be a little tricky in some spots. And then a mostly dry pattern follows for the remainder of the 10-day period, but we're still watching next weekend in case that does come up a little bit closer. We do have a coastal system to deal with. That would be in the Sunday, Monday time frame of next week. But right now the models are indicating it's going to stay offshore. I don't want to trust that because, they totally blew the period coming up here between Wednesday and Sunday. So, still kind of in flux and adjusting to the stratospheric changes in the long range here too. So this could be something we just have to watch it. The pattern change to a sustainable cold one and henceforth snow that would follow would be post January 20th. And we're still sticking to that this morning. So that's our summary for today. We're just kind of in a holding pattern right now until we get out of this current fast west-east flow here in this very crappy pattern here that is not conducive for winter events other than these little thread-the-needle events like coming in Monday night, little icing type thing. But other than that, we got to get out of this flow, and if we get something that look like this by January 20th, which is our projected date, we could be in business and be in business for a while. I'm EPAWA meteorologist Bobby Martrich, and that is this edition of Weather Weeklies for Sunday, January 6th. Join us again next week. Hopefully we'll have a better handle on this pattern change and get a definitive dates of when things are going to occur, maybe even have a snow event or two to track at that point. But in the meantime, enjoy your week. It'll be hopefully a dry one and uneventful one as far as precipitation is concerned. So just persevere a little bit longer, snow lovers. I think you'll enjoy it once we get into that pattern flip, but it's going to take some time. Take care.